Okay, so we should say, all right. Hi. My name is Raven Fonseca Jensen. I'm 18 years old.
I'm Saskia Knight. I'm 18 years old.
And welcome to Generation Porn. It's your host, Raven. Saskia couldn't join us today, but I'm here with a very special guest. This is my blood, my older sibling.
I'm Ocean. I'm 22, and my pronouns are they, them, and I'm Raven's older sibling.
I already said that. So
well,
okay. So basically, today we're gonna be talking about porn and sex and just like other stuff. So
very structured episode.
Yes.
Super structured. You don't want to talk about being gay because I'm gay.
Well, I mean, obviously I do want to talk about that, but
you didn't want to come out the gate with that.
I brought you on because you're
right.
gay.
Because I'm so gay.
Trans
hey, that's a good reason to bring someone somewhere.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned,
there's definitely a contributing factor. All right, yeah. So I guess let's just get into it, and we're gonna just kind of start rolling on this. What are your thoughts?
I, like a lot of people my age, I think, was on the internet from a young age. And I was, for some reason, I had become part of a bunch of these kind of shady Facebook groups. One of them that I spent the most time on was called Satan, was the name of the group. And it was modded by this guy. And then like all these people were on it. And I think they were all older than me. Like I suspect that most of them were not 12. And the first porn that I ever saw was a black and white comic, like a manga comic, of a chimp fucking a woman.
Oh,
it was the first like sex illustration I ever encountered. So from there, I mean, it's just downhill from there, right? Like you can't really like come back from that.
No.
Yeah. So I didn't have a very normal entry into. Most people at least get a couple weeks where they're just watching normal porn. I didn't have any of that. When you're younger and you find pornography, your first assumption is that everyone's having a good time, right? Like you're not like wired to think that like, oh, that person is being violated because of the premise of what porn is.
Exactly.
But I think the moment when I realized that that wasn't true, like to an extent that I hadn't even like thought was possible, is the category on Pornhub that's called reality. Have you ever encountered this? Basically, it's a category on Pornhub that is all videos of porn stars like breaking essentially and being like, please, like we have to stop.
Oh my god.
And leaving set.
That's horrible. Why is that a category?
Because that's what guys want to see. Is
people like that?
Yeah, because that's what BDSM is. It's like brutalizing someone.
That is horrifying.
And they get off on the fact that the real person had to like stop the shoot. And the more painful, the more extreme the scene, the more they pay the girl.
Horrifying. I mean, and that's the thing again, because it's like with sex, it's like you can be into whatever you want, and I know that like having interest in violence is natural. I read that like there's actually this phenomenon where like anxiety, the feeling anxiety, our body confuses with arousal, and so if you're kind of freaked out because it's something really violent or scary or really interesting, it can heighten the arousal.
Feeling in your stomach.
Right, which makes sense. But what I really don't like is we're creating basically a situation in which teens are getting their sexualities tailored to this video, which is of real women, not just like a fantasy, but of real women actually not enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, not that all porn stars don't enjoy. I'm sure there are porn stars that enjoy their scenes, and there's a lot of different types of porn. But I will say, in terms of mainstream stuff, I
saw a horrible statistic about, I don't remember what the exact number was, but like some huge number of porn stars, their anus falls out and they have to have it stapled back into their fucking body. Like,
awful.
Like shit like that. Like that's super real. And I think the whole fantasy of porn is that it's so in a bubble, or you never see the aftermath. You don't see the lead up or the after part. You just see the scene, and she's getting gaped and it all seems fine, but then that girl probably had to go home and be like, fuck, I gotta go to the hospital. Shit, I can't take a shit. I'm not really sure like what you want me to talk
they put
about
like
here.
a fruit in their butthole.
The grapefruit trick.
like a whole ew.
You ever heard that one?
No.
Oh my god, it's hilarious. It's not a porn video. It's really funny.
Like someone putting a grapefruit.
No, it's this woman talking about the grapefruit method, which is to cut a hole into a grapefruit and put it around your man's peen
What?
while you're sucking him off.
Wait, what?
Yeah, no, it was viral back in the day.
But wouldn't that
I
like
remember.
sting?
I mean, I think there are a lot of things wrong with that.
Like, would it sting to get citrus juice into your dick hole? Please submit comments. Let us know.
Call in, write in, and let us know. And if everyone knows a dick hole, put a little bit of lemonade in there and let us know how it feels. All right.
No, literally.
One of the most harmful parts about porn and the dynamics that it plants into your the dynamics that it plants into your head is that it leads girls to, I think, accept that sex isn't about them and that they're just there to give pleasure to the guy and, you know, do what he wants to do. And I definitely like have experienced that, you know, pre being a lesbian. And it's horrifying. And guys expect that. It's not just, you know, like women being pushovers. It's very real pressure. And when I you know, trigger warning for sexual violence, but when I was assaulted, I remember thinking, wow, like all of this stuff that he's saying to me, it sounds like a porn. Like they definitely got this from porn. Like there's no reason that an 18-year-old boy would like just the verbal, you know, demeanment, the violence, the choking, all of that
horrible
is. I mean, there's a scene in Euphoria, right?
Yeah.
When Cassie and McKay, when he chokes her and he says, "I thought you would like it," and she says, "Why the fuck would I like that?"
Yeah,
and that's that. I've really like connected to that scene because I think guys. I mean, part of what's sad is that a lot of guys who are not trying to hurt anyone, who just want to have fun, and they, you know, they watch porn and they think that's what women want.
Yeah, and
women watch porn and they're like, I guess that's what men want me to want.
Right.
And so that cycle creates, I think, for men a great amount of anxiety and uncertainty about what's appropriate during sex. And for women, I think it creates a double consciousness of what am I doing? Like, you know, what am I actually feeling? And what does he want me to be feeling? Because what sex should be is, you know, an intimate, like, exposure of your soul to someone else, or, you know, a quest for your mutual pleasure.
Yeah.
But I think it ends up being highly performative on both ends. There's no reason that a teenager would assume that he should be hitting someone or choking them or telling them that they're dirty and disgusting. Like who? Yeah. What?
Like what?
Why would that improve my experience unless we've agreed that that's like what we're both into? That's one thing. I think that a lot of straight people and gay people have sex in a way that's extremely emotionally and physically damaging, and they just don't know how to talk about it. I mean, like that was my biggest takeaway from being straight briefly, was that no one talks about sex when it's happening. Like it's supposed to just like happen. Yeah. And you're supposed to just have this natural, you know, like, but like that's really just not a good way to have fun sex. Yeah. And it ends up creating a situation where so many times when I was younger, when I was, you know, a teenager, would be having sex and in my head would be like, I don't want to do this. And for me, it took being, you know, having sex that wasn't straight sex to be like, oh shit, like that's actually super weird. And like the fact that I didn't feel comfortable to even say a single word during sex was not normal, and like was creating a really uncomfortable situation for me where I didn't feel like I had autonomy over my own body. So ultimately, the condition of the woman in porn is a complete loss of bodily autonomy. Like she has no say. Yeah,
the child, right?
Essentially. I mean, it's almost as if the female porn star is incapable of giving consent. Yeah. Even if she says, you know, yes, whatever, you can still kind of feel that if she wasn't saying that, it wouldn't matter. Yeah. Like she's just adding that on. Yeah. But like, and the whole genre of like, she's stuck in the table, she's stuck in the dryer, she's stuck under the bed, whatever. And like that is just all out rape, like just 100% rape, but it's framed that it's not rape, that it's just like spontaneous sex.
What I've always said is that the identity of the female, porn star, or like the female during sex, is wanting to be raped, which is kind of a paradox, right?
Right.
It's a paradox because it's that you really want it, but also like you don't for some reason. And so the guy is like pushing through, and it's like, you don't want it, but he's so good that like you want it.
That's why not every, but many categories of porn rest on a premise of taboo, which creates a situation where the woman wants it, but she's not supposed to want it.
Right.
Which is the appeal of like incest porn. Or of teacher-student porn. Or of landlord-tenant porn.
What?
That's a huge one.
No.
Yeah. Basically, swallowing the
jizz
woman's or not swallowing, like disregarding the woman's desires because you know what she really wants, right? Because she's really, women are really sluts. So, like that's all they want.
All they want
to get fucked and blah blah blah.
To circle back when you were talking about being gay earlier, because you were talking about
to the money, get to the money shot.
You were talking about queer sexual relations as opposed to straight sexual relations, and I guess. What would you say is the main difference between those two things? I guess, like, do you think that porn can be just as harmful when you're having, like, gay sex versus straight sex?
I think porn harms everyone. But I would say that the reason that queer sex, in my experience, is very different from straight sex is in relation to porn, is that, like I was saying, porn is the secret paradigm of logic, right? There's something that you can't say out loud, but within you, you're striving towards a certain sexual dynamic, whether it's, like daddy, little girl, or mommy, son, whatever it is that the guy...
Those are the only two.
That's honestly pretty much the only two ones. But whatever it is, it's a secret in your mind that you're holding during the sexual experience. The reason that is not as much the case for queer people is because you really can't have sex as a queer person without talking about it just a little bit. One person tops and one person bottoms. Just like physically. And that often translates into a certain dynamic. The reason that it's different from straight sex is because that dynamic isn't just taken for granted. Right. In the way that when you're having straight sex, especially as a young person, the guy is dominant. Like there's no... What are you gonna fucking say?
Unless you're tying up the guy,
Right. Unless you're like, a real confident young girl. But I certainly wasn't. And I, was willing to do whatever they wanted, and they always want the same thing. They want to choke you, they want to fuck you from behind, they want to come inside of you and slap you and whatever, and say how you're so slutty and you're so dirty and whatever. Well, it's just like kind of it's pretty pathetic that men can't even tell like when women are aroused, which I think is totally due to porn also. Is that in porn, I'm assuming that men are like, an aroused lady in the porn. Right. But those people aren't really that aroused. Right. And so when they, come into the real world to have sex, they're like, what do you mean? We kiss once and then I like I just kind of like mix a record on your clit for 30 seconds and then we're done, right? And then it's my turn. Which, like, in reality, like, foreplay could last for hours.
Yeah. I mean, and I always say, like, because I think, we're dealing with the Me Too movement.
Oh, my God.
And I guess I've often found myself weirdly on the side of, like, trying to, like, be like, cancel culture is bad. And I guess, like, trying not to just label people an assaulter and cast them out of society because I'll pass it to you on that.
I mean, I feel like it's a similar debate as, like, the mental illness debate, right? So it's like, yes, people are mentally ill. Yes, they deserve to have treatment, to have visibility, to have their needs recognized, their trauma, etc. But I think a lot of the time, the way that people talk about mental illness, when people say, like everyone needs to go to therapy, it sort of ducks the question of why is everyone so depressed? Why is everyone so mentally ill? And in the same way, when you say, when you're like, kill all the rapists, it's like, why are so many 16-year-old boys raping people? Right? Like, is that normal? Right. Is that just like how guys are? I think that's the way that it's been justified throughout history.
Yeah.
But I don't buy that, like, it's just our natural, affliction that children are just like rapists and that they need to just be annexed from society. I think there's a larger, and I wish that we could bring back, and maybe we can bring back this term that was kind of trashed in the late 1800s, early 1900s, but the concept of a social ill, something that's not a personal problem because it has to do with a societal state of being.
Yeah.
Like, it used to be that people being depressed, it was considered a social problem,
right?
Not a personal responsibility or a personal, we've sort of turned everyone into a patient.
Yeah.
And I think that as much as that can be a useful dialectic, the sick and the healthy, or the rapist and the victim,
right?
It also is overly simplistic. I mean, and treating people like they're expendable is a quick way to make them act even crazier.
When you talk about the cycle of trauma, right? If you've been molested or raped, you're way more likely to molest and rape people. And so I think that in itself really breaks this narrative we have of rapist versus survivor, right? And then how do we deal with that? Because I feel like we've gotten into this thing where they're like, if you've been sexually harmed, you're always right, and you need to be put on a pedestal.
You're entitled to burn that person alive.
And then if you did the thing, then you should die and kill yourself, right? And these especially go along the lines of the guy being punished and the woman being, supported. And like, obviously, support for people that's been sexually harmed. Like, we're still, I'm not trying to say we're like past that point where like we're already doing a good job. We're not at all, right?
No, and I mean, I also recognize that part of the reason that the feminist movement takes such a strong stance on, like abusers or whatever word you want to use is because for years and years and years, it was never spoken about, and it was completely not an option to bring that to the public. Like, it was totally taboo.
Yeah.
And so I understand sort of the vehement defense of people who have been silenced, people who, their trauma has been minimized and their attackers have been allowed to continue on their life with no consequences. And I completely empathize with that and have experienced that very feeling of having, shared my experience and having it ignored and, being forced to share space with that person anyway. And I am against that. And I do think that people who commit sexual violence should be held accountable. At the same time, I think that if you are trying to solve any kind of social issue without empathy being sort of your first reaction or your first priority, you're just going to end up ostracizing the people that really ultimately need to be brought in. Like, you can't just send everyone who's ever done a sexual crime to an island and no one would ever do sexual crimes again. Obviously, there's a reason. It's not just that they're bad apples from birth. I feel like the most common occurrence is that the guy didn't even realize that what he was doing was wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason for that is because of porn, because it's so easy to mistake consent for not consent.
Yeah.
Because in porn, they might as well be the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to think that something is normal, to think that something's just hot, or, this is just how sex is. And really, you're committing an act of violence without knowing it.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is incredibly sad.
Yeah. No, I agree. And yeah, I think really ultimately what you're saying about empathy is the most important thing. I think that it is hard because, again, I know people that have done this type of stuff, and then people call them out and they're like, oh, whatever, she's crazy, and then you really want to take away their social status, because it's like the only thing sometimes that can force someone to look within, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that's what's so hard, because I think that almost no matter what, I feel like we're at a place where if you get accused of sexual assault, it's gonna be shitty. It's gonna fuck up.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be in a good place. I think you have to be willing to be like, okay, some people are not gonna fuck with me. Maybe I'm gonna not be able to go to this party. Maybe I'm gonna have to take this time. Maybe I'm gonna have to be confused and feel bad and have people not forgive me. And that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. In fact, if you're able to take that and sit with that and continue to just try to do your best, I think that's the most respectable thing that you can do.
Yeah. Anyone can reserve the right, like you said, to not forgive that person. And I think that sometimes forgiveness is the thing that allows people to go on without really holding themselves accountable. So in that situation, you know, everyone has the right to hold a grudge. But I also don't think that people need to be sort of like cast out. Teenagers are in such a formative period of their life. And I think being treated with cruelty at that age makes a very hardened individual.
Oh, yeah, no.
People, you know, you talk about like incels and shit.
Yeah.
And people who become school shooters or whatever.
Right.
Like, I think that experience of being socially ostracized is a precursor to a more violent, a more detached person versus, empathetic engagement.
You know, there are a lot of guys that are really nice and they're like, what do I like do?
What do you want from me,
dude?
Like
fuck. And like, yeah, and I'm like, fuck, like, I don't know, dude.
I mean, it's an interesting debate because on the one hand, you know, you don't want to feel like you can't be friends with men. Like you were saying, the merging of feeling uncomfortable and feeling aroused, I think, creates a situation where it's hard for men to feel disgusted at the idea of rape because they've been jacking off to it since they were 12.
Exactly.
And they can way more easily get into the headspace of the rapist than get into the headspace of the victim. And I think that has everything to do with porn. The POV of the porn is not the woman's POV. And imagine how horrifying it would be if it was. Can you imagine like a porn that's like woman's POV and it's just the guy over her like, like that would be disgusting.
It sounds horrible.
Yeah, it sounds so bad.
We should force guys to have to watch that. Like, just
we should put that in sex ed.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, kind of non sequitur, but really that gets into homophobia when you think about guys not wanting to be fucked.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
And how that has to do with rape. I don't even really have a lot of language to talk about what that.
Well, I mean, that goes back to what I was talking about. You know, the unspeakable nature of heterosexual sex dynamics.
Yeah.
The most evolved man, and I think this is kind of a meme, but is also a truth, is men who want women to dominate them tend to be way more in touch with their sexuality because it takes a lot to admit that. If you're a straight man, like, you know, you have to sort of overcome your fear that, you know, people will think you're unmanly and whatever. And so when guys have made it to that juncture, they end up being way more like, I pull back from using the word feminist, but I think they end up being way more aware of the implications of the sex that they have versus, and guys will always be like, I don't know, like guys who like want to choke you and like whatever, always like, this is just like what I like. I don't know. It's just like, I can't like change it. Like, it's just like, that's just me. And they never have considered, you know, where did you get that from? That's when these sort of accidental acts of violence occur, is when your sexual desires or your, you know, your identity, your position during sex is something that you absolutely are not willing to examine even a little bit. Yeah. That like you defensively will say, it's just natural, it's just who I am.
I know. And that's interesting because I've talked to guys who I can tell have a lot of angst because they feel like they're like perverted, you know, and I'm sure, and it's funny to me because like, again, like I was 11, 12 watching crazy rapey porn all the time. And, you know, and I was able to understand it and think about it. Obviously I do this podcast, but I think there's so many guys, they watch it, they watch crazy porn, you know, they watch the hentai. And they're like, God, I guess I'm just like a sick, twisted pervert.
Yeah,
and I was born this way.
They feel embarrassed.
And I feel sad because I'm like, you know, first of all, like, it's not your bad. And second of all, I guess it's like you're saying, like, sexual desire isn't that rigid.
Right. And that's sort of the tragedy of straight sex, is it's so unimaginative. Yeah. It's like so formulaic. And that's why I have a great amount of respect for, again, the kink community, because they're really some of the only, and not to say that everyone in the kink community is straight, because they're definitely not. Yeah. But straight people who are into kink are some of the only straight people who have really taken the time out of their day to be like, why do I want this? Yeah. What is going on in my brain that this is the thing that I want? Yeah. And how can I protect my partner so that we can still do this thing that I want to do in a way that doesn't demean them actually, like in real life. Right. People who haven't had that examination don't know how to do that. They don't. You know, and they mock that desire. Like, you know, it's a joke to have like a safe word. Right. Or something. Yeah. Where I think a lot of people would really benefit from being able to talk about, you know, if something bad happens during sex, if someone doesn't like it, to be able to say like, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Or how people will always, you know, in like sex education, they'll always say, you know, active consent is a thing, you know, like they have to be saying yes,
saying yes every time.
And kids, you know, when I was in high school, would always be like, what? Like, that's so stupid. Like, that's not realistic. That's not going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And I think the fact that people have that sort of like, you know, they want to write off the need for consent because they don't want to confront what kind of sex they're actually having. I think the reason that when guys like do something fucked up when they're, you know, in high school or in college, the reason that their friends usually don't abandon them is because they've probably done something like that too. And the girl just didn't like, you know, care enough or was too afraid or didn't even know to like, you know, describe it that way. But I think, you know, a lot of the stuff, stealthing, you know, fucking someone who's super drunk, like forcing someone to give you head, all of those things are things that are really, really normalized, I think, like within men's communities. Like when they talk about it to each other, they're like, don't worry, man. Like we all know, like, you know, where we would take it if it didn't matter. If the girl was a porn star. And you could do whatever you want. The reason that people don't want to talk about it, that they think kink is like cringe.
That's going to ruin it.
Is that talking about it is going to ruin the natural like feeling of it. Which I think is, again, circling back, why it's less of a problem. Not, well, I don't want to make any generalizations, but queer people, there's no option for just like, this is just like, you know, man and woman, animal. So like, no, like we're definitely just doing this for fun. So let's just like, you know, evaluate, how it can be fun. Versus like, this is just like raw.
This is like, we're like the first
I'm like a caveman.
Ever. No, dude. I mean, you know, I will say, because I know we've been talking so much about how, and we'll wrap up soon, but we've been talking a lot about how, you know, porn leads to raping and harming. But I think that another thing that is quite important to talk about is that I think that a lot of people these days, especially in high school, you know, they look out at this horrifying terrain that we've basically described about sex and you know, how it seems so like not just like easy and straightforward. And they're like, okay, I'm just like not gonna do anything.
They say no thanks.
Like I'm waiting it out. I feel like I've seen at my high school, like pre and post the kind of like outpour of like cries about sexual harassment. I think I've seen a change in the culture where I feel like guys feel, and maybe this is good, obviously to a certain extent, guys feel less like they can just go up and just start grinding.
They feel less empowered.
But I do think that it can be really negative in some ways, because I think that often the way it manifests, and I feel like I've heard a guy say this once, is they're like, I don't know, like, I don't want to get fucking canceled. I'm just going to stay away from all these bitches, you know? But then it's like, hey, like, we still want to, like, hook up.
Well, and I think they also, like, because there's so little discussion about these issues, I think it's easier to a lot of young boys to be like, you know what, fuck, like I'll just only watch porn.
Right, and that's the horrible movie
because watching porn allegedly isn't hurting anyone. But then when you finally do have sex with a girl and like you're drunk, and then, you know, suddenly you're enacting all this shit that you've been feeding yourself. And, you know, you're right, it's a horrible Mobius strip.
Assuming your dick even works at that point.
And it probably doesn't. And, you know, the feelings of shame and of resentment, those feelings do not lead to healthy relationships. And, you know, we mentioned incels before. I think the existence, the burgeoning incel community is could be classified as a social ill, I think. It's a result of ongoing sexual situation in which this sort of painful transition from patriarchal, you know, men get whatever they want situation to this like men still want to get whatever they want, but now there's this danger that like they'll be like socially killed if they, you know, go for what they want. And I don't think that they've really been presented with a third option.
Right.
And, you know, maybe that's what your podcast is doing, presenting the third option.
What is the third option? No, I mean, that's a really great way to describe it. I think that that's a perfect encapsulation of the current like phenomenon around, all of these sexual issues, incels and porn and violence and harm and addiction and all these things, I think, are really all part of the same thing.
The third option is maybe not, people wouldn't think of as like the sexiest option, but And, you know, it's easier said than done, but you just have to talk about it. The more you talk about it, the less it feels like it's just a part of you. You know what I mean? Like, the more you can mediate it with conscious understanding, the less it will control you in everything you do.
Yeah.
And, you know, feel like this horrible undercurrent that you have no power over. It's like, you know, you can will your mind into changing.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a fact. And I think dispelling this notion that sexual desire and preference and fantasy is something that it's just like in your DNA is the first step to helping people have healthier understandings of their sexual self. You know, I'm sure that if you, and I think you could attest to this because you stopped watching porn.
I did.
That your mental fantasy like capability shot up.
Yeah, well,
right?
No, definitely. I think that the biggest takeaway I had from not watching porn, and it's kind of cringe, I guess, but I think that I really used to be unaroused by like actual intimacy and like care
by sensuality.
And I was like, that's cringe and gross. And yeah, I want the cool stuff. I'm down with the boys.
Right,
You know, I'm one of the cool girls. I want to get banged. And yeah, then I feel like it really opened up this whole thing where I'm like, I just want to like kiss, you know?
And, I mean, it's sad because I think once you have intimacy and trust in a relationship, you totally can get banged.
Yeah.
Like super, like normally
ropes.
In a way that's not like super uncomfortable and weird. But there's this problem where like no one told teen boys that you have to like have trust before you can just I think that's part of hookup culture too. There's this idea you can just have crazy sex with like a stranger
every time,
and the feeling of emptiness that follows I think is really profound and leads men and other people too to just like not want to have sex at all. That they would rather just, you know, leave it untouched than to have to confront all of these problems. What are our closing thoughts?
Fuck. I mean, I guess stop watching porn. I mean, unless you don't want to. I don't know. Not because
our calls to action. Stop watching porn.
Because I'm not just gonna say, because again, everything we've discussed, as much as I do think that porn can drill into your head on a regular basis horrible ideas, it's not that in itself that is the problem. It's the way you're thinking about shit. It's the way you're doing shit. And yeah, I guess I would just say, I don't know, fucking like journal or something. And bottom line, we need to stop being ashamed of stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's such a boner killer. Like, shame is so cringy.
Let your freak flag fly, guys.
Yeah.
That's our call to action for this week, is to let your freak flag fly.
It is.
Because if porn was like required to like not have any plot holes, I feel like it would be less exploitative. Like if it had to make sense that they were having sex, it would be a totally different situation.
Dude, I think the funniest porn plot I've ever seen is a lumberjack. He's out in the woods.
Okay.
And then,
I'm listening.
This girl, she chained herself to the tree because she's
classic.
like an environmentalist.
Oh my God.
And she's like, get out from the tree.
No.
And she's like, I won't. And he's like, well, I'm just going to like fuck you.
Oh my God.
I was like, for sure.
Holy shit.
Like, what?
Oh.
And then he just leaves her there.
He doesn't even unchain her?
No, dude, he left her there.
Damn.
But I was like, I thought he needed to cut down the tree.
Well, he got what he came for, I guess.
Like,
wow, that's kind of fantastic. I don't know. That's imaginative at the very least.
I know. I think it was really a commentary on our current society, you know?
Totally.